Hey guys, welcome back to Horsetooth Cinema. Today I'm going to be reviewing the big guy, the one that everyone is talking about right now, and that is of course The Odyssey, directed by Christopher Nolan. This stars Matt Damon, Anne Hathaway, Tom Holland, Robert Pattinson, Charlize Theron, Zendaya, and a whole shitload of other great names. It of course tells the story of literally one of the oldest stories we have, the story of Odysseus, his 10-year journey through the Trojan War, an additional 10-year journey to get home, and the brewing plot between his wife, his son, and the suitors that are trying to take over Ithaca. So Nolan is somebody who I've talked about a lot on the channel, and somebody I think who my opinion on him has changed a lot over time. There were times in my life where I thought that he was overrated by the film bro community. There were times where I thought he was underrated by the kind of sniffly, like, art house crowd. And I think I've come to the conclusion that he's rated as a director. He is somebody who is really respected in the modern film community, and rightly so. I think there is a real sleekness to his artistic craft, and he's also doing more to uphold the box office than just about any other filmmaker working today. As a filmmaker in his own right, he is very mechanical. He's somebody who really likes to take a peek behind the curtain and really consciously analyze the illusion itself. I think the modern filmmaker he probably shares the most DNA with and his interest is probably Bertrand Bonello. Bonello's also somebody who is I would describe his filmmaking style as like this house of mirrors kind of optical illusion, a sort of thing that it takes a while to put together. It takes a few viewings to understand the structure of his films. But unlike Bertrand Bonello, Nolan is working on a much larger scale, a true blockbuster scale. After the success of his previous movies, particularly the Oscar-winning and billion-dollar success that was Oppenheimer, Nolan has essentially been given a blank check by Hollywood. And he is working on cashing that in because while there have been lots of other adaptations of the Odyssey before in film history, I'm fairly confident we've never seen one like this done on this scale. Not only does Nolan stick to his usual guns of wanting to shoot as much in camera as possible, even sequences like the Cyclops bit, while there's CGI, there's a puppet with that sequence, so there's every sequence does have some real weighty meat to it. But he also decided to complete a historical first by making this the first film where the entirety of it is shot on IMAX. And when you think about the logistics of doing that, of having these gigantic, super loud cameras in intimate dialogue sequences, so they had to cover up the cameras with like these sarcophagus and then still change the reel every few minutes, let alone what it's like to put one of those cameras out in the middle of the ocean on one of these rickety boats they've built. It's quite a feat. So if you're interested in like the mechanics and the behind the scenes aspects of filmmaking, there are so many like how the fuck did they do this moments throughout the Odyssey. But when I watch any movie, even a Nolan movie, it can't just be about the mechanics for me. It does have to come down to the emotion. It's an emotional medium, and so it still comes down to am I drawn in by the story? Do I care about the characters? Do I lose myself in the experience for a couple of hours? And in that regard, I want to say this film, I think, is very, very, very good. It's maybe not quite on the level of some of my favorite Nolan movies in that regard. There's some bits, especially early on in the film, when we're just kind of like setting up the characters, and even some sequences here and there. I'm thinking the sequence in particular when they go to this island, they're walking through the forest, and then they discover these soldiers that end up fighting them. These soldiers, in the trailer, people kind of rightly pointed out that they look like robots. But that aside, some of those sequences were a little they just didn't hit quite as hard as the others. And I think a lot of that does come down to the source material. This is a very hard thing to adapt, not only because of its length, but also because of its episodic nature. In some ways, it's very convenient for Nolan that the Odyssey is already non-linear in the way that it's written. But, no matter which way you adapt it, I think the non-linear nature of it kind of doesn't matter, because regardless of how you choose to structure it, it's going to feel very episodic. It's going to feel like a bunch of bits where some bits are amazing and then some bits are kind of forgettable. And I think because of that episodic nature, when you compare it to some of Nolan's previous movies, I'm not thinking about Interstellar, The Prestige, Dunkirk, it just doesn't, it's not as quite as good of a vehicle on which to emotionally like crescendo, and then especially in Oppenheimer's case, decrescendo, where you really feel the dread of this character and kind of the weight of what he's done. So yeah, the episodic nature, I think, does limit it a little bit. And there were certainly bits, like I mentioned, that didn't really grab me quite as much. But there was a point in the movie, I will say, It starts a little bit once we get to the Cyclops sequence, which is an amazing bit of tension with, the soldiers trying to figure out how to get out of the cave. And then later, I think when it really kicks into gear for me and becomes a much more interesting movie, a much more engaging movie, is when we meet Samantha Morton's character. She plays Circe. That bit in isolation is absolutely my favorite thing in the movie. And it just has new challenges for Nolan. I think both practically, like just in terms of the effects work that they were doing and the kind of scary, almost like horror movie emotions that scene invokes. I don't usually expect to go into a Christopher Nolan movie and start thinking, see images that remind me of The Howling or like Brian Yuzna's Society or things like that. And there's a lot of really great sequences in this section throughout the film. After this, we visit like the Hades realm to meet Tiresias. The Sirens bit I think is great, and I really do love the battle sequences and everything that we see once Odysseus returns home. The whole bit with the suitors is pretty amazing. Though I will say some of the action in that section is a little bit subpar for Nolan standards. It's a little bit underlit, and sometimes it can be a little shaky. But it's still much more coherent than the vast majority of action stuff that comes out today. And I really do like this latter half of the movie in particular. I think it's where it becomes something that's far more morally complex and psychologically subjective than the kind of hero's journey story that the Odyssey famously is. And I was kind of thinking maybe it would just be that basic hero's journey. But I think in some ways this is a twin of Oppenheimer. I think this movie has a lot of the same ideas on its mind of kind of the delayed consequences of a character who goes off and experiences this mission because then they think it's the most important thing in the world. Then they realize the consequences of their actions later. And in Odysseus's case, it's very much his absence, and that's what it's done to his family, what it's done to Ithaca. And the ending, I certainly think, is one of Nolan's strongest final images that he's created to sort of, express the collective consequences of war. It's not just personal for Odysseus and his kingdom, but it's a broader statement on societies diverting resources to just destruction rather than creation, wisdom, entrepreneurship, all of those virtues. One last thing I do want to talk about is the cast. I think there has been a lot of horrendous discourse around the cast. I think there's all the people talking about Lupita Nyong'o and Elliot Page, of course, and what I would just say to all that is it's a movie. It is not a documentary about ancient Greece. Nolan thinks these actors are very talented and work well for the role. They have kind of intrinsic qualities that fit these characters, and I see what he's going for there. I don't really think it's anything beyond that, and I think, I think it really shows in the box office the fact that this has made a lot of money, and this is not something that killed the movie because it's just, the movie trying to virtue signal or something. I think people can smell that shit from a mile away. But there is an aspect of the cast I do have a little criticism of, and it's not a major thing. It's just something that I think, in the best possible version of this movie, it would be a little different. And that is Matt Damon. I think he's very good in the film, and I think basically everybody in the movie is very good. But Matt Damon in particular, I think I think he's just a little bit too much of an everyman as an actor to be the ideal role of Odysseus. Recently, I watched a movie that came out, I think last year or 2 years ago, called The Return, which is a kind of more art house movie that is just a retelling of the ending part of the Odyssey where Odysseus returns home. And the actor who plays Odysseus in that is Ralph Fiennes, and for one, he is absolutely jacked. I would say a little, like, alarmingly jacked, more so than Matt Damon as in the Odyssey. But I think more than that, he just brings a more kind of dour, like sinister aspects to the character that I think is, really necessary to where the arc of the character goes. I think while you do see a little bit more of a brooding quality to Matt Damon as the movie goes on, the movie is resting on his shoulders in the same way that Oppenheimer was resting on Cillian Murphy's shoulders. And, Cillian Murphy just pulled it off perfectly, where I think Matt Damon is just slightly not quite right for this role. I think he did probably as good of a job as he could have done. I think he's just ever so slightly miscast. But with those nitpicks aside, I loved this. I thought it was, just one of the most transfixing experiences I've had in the cinema this year. I'm definitely going to give this 4 stars. Right now, it's probably in my top 2 or 3 movies I've seen this year. And you got to go see it. And I want, see it as big as possible. If you can see it in the laser 70mm IMAX, go do that. If you don't have one of those near you, just see it as big as you can, because it's really an event. Anyway, that's going to do it for this video. If you like it, you can like the video down below and subscribe to the channel if you're new. I've got more videos coming soon, and I'll see you guys in the next one. See ya.